One of the concerns we have on the right is if you have 100 people who like baseball and every year they vote to allocate tax funds to a baseball game, and you bring in 101 people who play cricket, when it comes to a vote, cricket is going to win, and the people who are from there get angry and it leads to conflict.
Yeah, so within our own country, right, there are people who like baseball and there are people who like basketball, right? Let's say some people who like basketball from New York, and they come to Florida where people like baseball. And then from there, you can say there's cultural displacement. Yeah, that happens when we have migrant flows, right? And all of a sudden, we have a conflict. That happens with internalized movement, and it happens with externalized movement. That's understand. That's what happens when new people get come in contact with each other. But that's okay. That's the thing that can happen. And the U.S. is actually uniquely capable of doing this, right? We have been taking immigrants, a country of immigrants, we've been taking immigrants from the very beginning. We're actually very good with onboarding immigrants compared to a lot of those European countries. But in any case, right, I actually do want to pull it back because
I'll pull it back.
Sure. Yeah, again, agreed. I don't know what
is that a real thing?
Yeah.
Unconstitutional genital. Okay.
U.S. law banning female genital mutilation declared unconstitutional.
That's insanity.
Then I
This is from 7
well,
years
then
ago.
I disagree.
6 years ago.
Sure. I disagree with that.
Federal judge in Detroit. See, here's the issue.
I don't care. I would really
You don't care that they did that?
No, hold on. I do care. Hold on. I do care about female genital mutilation. I've already said that, right? But in terms of this actual court case, right? Like, yes, I agree with you. Assuming that you're giving the story correctly, right? I'm just.
I don't know.
That.
I just pulled it up. I didn't read it.
Oh, okay, right.
Let me ask you a question. They're not gotchas. Literal question. Do you think that gender identity should be protected?
Oh my God, no. Sorry. I want to talk about Doge.
I get that. I'm in the context of this. I have a series of questions to ask you.
You
can say no opinion, no comment.
I'm not prepared for on female genital mutilation. If you want to have me,
I'm not going to ask you about female genital mutilation
or gender theory or whatever.
I'm not going to ask you about gender theory.
I don't want to talk about it.
So no comment.
Not on that. Like,
okay, so
come back, invite me back, and I'll have that conversation with you.
Okay, so
I'm not going to have a conversation right now.
I'll explain the issue as to migration, as we were talking about it, which correlates with the San Antonio Endeavor facility, the waste of money, and the Biden administration allowing people in. In Michigan, of course, a judge ruled that this is 6 years old, that the ban on female genital mutilation was unconstitutional. Someone in this country might ask themselves, how is it possible that a judge would declare such a thing? So the reason I bring up human rights law, and you don't got to answer it, whatever, is that in New York City, they say that gender identity is defined as self-expression, meaning the name you give yourself, the pronouns you use, and the clothing you wear, no matter what it may be. Well, this literally means that an individual could dress up like a cowboy and call himself cowboy gender. But I don't but I don't think a judge is going to look at that and say, well, hold on there a gosh darn minute. So in the story I've told quite a bit, I talked to several human rights lawyers in New York and asked them if I dressed up in, say, a clown costume for my first day at work and said I was clown gender, would they have to respect me dressed up like Bozo? And they said, no, they can fire you for that. And I said, hold on, though. The law clearly states in plain English, what I wear, what I call myself is my gender identity, and it is a protected class. The response I got was a judge would laugh you out of the courtroom if you tried to pull that card. What ends up happening in places like Michigan, and I'm not saying it was specifically for this story, is if you have an area that becomes 60, 70% of any culture, the judges in that place will represent that culture. When the question arises to a Christian moral traditionalist American, should we ban female genital mutilation? They're going to say without a doubt, well, of course, you can't do that. But what happens when you get a judge who this is part of their culture and they call it female circumcision, not mutilation? They're going to say, you can't ban that. That's a religious traditional practice. The judges interpret the law, and they will interpret as their culture and moral traditions dictate. To my point, to wrap it all up, and we can go back to Doge or whatever, when I mentioned I don't know that we necessarily want more or less immigration, the question is not just economics or unemployment, it's cultural displacement. Do we want people to form communities where their judges interpret our laws in ways that would actually shock Americans? Like you were both rather shocked to find a judge in Detroit said that it is unconstitutional to ban female genital mutilation.
Can I add one thing to that before we go back to Doge? This is also another problem that I found out recently. I saw New York was considering letting legal migrants start voting, which I'm not a fan of in local elections, and I think California already does it. that exemplifies that exacerbates the problem that you're talking about right there. If we're having people that are not even citizens voting,
They'll always vote for their.
I mean, like, imagine if I was in Texas, right, and I have a ranch, because I do. If I decided, hey, I'm going to bring in a bunch of immigrants, and we're making the local laws to where, hey, they can vote. Well, they're just going to vote me into office, and I'm going to never get out, because what's good for me is good for them. Like, this is just a pathway to corruption that the Dems have been using, which is bringing in immigrants.
It's the end of
Pathway to
democracy.
corruption. Wow.
If non-citizens,
Embarrassing. Sorry.
if
It is embarrassing. I would be embarrassed if I was a Democrat.
non-citizens
No, yeah,
can
it's
vote,
an
there's no
embarrassing argument
democracy.
you're making here. But whatever. So I'm just
If non-citizens can vote, like they proposed in San Francisco and New York, and I believe in Connecticut,
I think there's a couple other
there is no democracy at all. Democracy
Okay,
ends.
great. Let's talk about Doge and how Doge is ending our democracy. All right,
How
let's
is it
talk
doing
about the. Yeah, sure, of course, right.
How is Doge ending democracy?
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. I'm sorry. Let's talk about that. So the reason why I think that Doge is ending the democracy is specifically because it's doing an end run around our own particular processes.
You did mention that when we opened the show. The question we then came to was, this gentleman here voted for it, and Trump won the popular vote, and now Trump isn't doing what he promised he'd do.
And I got a question.
Hold on,
How is that not democracy, though?
Sure, hold on. Well, then let's look at that, right? So there was a Reuters poll, right, talking about Americans are broadly supportive of the idea of cutting the size of the federal government, with 59% of respondents to a Reuters/Ipsos poll completed on Wednesday saying they supported that goal. Right?
How many voters? How many people were in the poll?
I don't know.
Well, it's important because we did a poll in November and found the majority of the country supported Doge.
It's at. Hold on, it's at 50. Well, I'm saying
where that poll?
It's at 59%.
Of how many people?
I don't know. We got
Right. So let me tell you.
We can just look up the poll. That's
70
fine.
plus million people voted for Doge. A poll is an opinion
Hold on.
extrapolation.
Hold on. We're going to talk about like what they voted for. I
want to talk about that.
That's what I'm getting. Okay, well then that's what I'm trying to get to, right? So 59% of respondents to Aurora's Ipsos poll that was completed this Wednesday said they supported that goal, right? But then they asked, right? So how about the way Trump is going about it, right? In terms of firing tens of thousands of federal workers, right? And then 59%, exactly that, say they opposed. The way that Trump is doing, right? So you're correct that people voted for cutting government, right? Like 70 million or whatever the number is, right? Voted for cutting that. But
Or Elon Musk to do it specifically.
No, hold on.
Yes.
They voted to cut waste, fraud, and abuse.
So
right?
let's just pause real quick.
Hold on.
To address your point,
Sure.
Elon Musk for a year said, we will have Doge. We will go in. We will cut these programs. We will fire people. Trump came out and campaigned on how they were going to do it, and people voted for him. You can argue that the masses are ignorant and didn't pay attention.
But just to prime your point real quick before you go on, because this has been a point that I've heard in the debate sphere, and it's mainly like a lot lately, right? And it's that all these Republicans got bamboozled. They can't believe what they voted for. What is Musk doing? And I'm sitting here going, who are these people? Because I'm a Republican. I talk to Republicans daily in my real life. I talk to Republicans in the online space. I talk to people. I haven't met a single Republican that just going, I hate it. There's some like me go, oh, I have some concerns about like what's going to happen next with a new agency and if like a Dem gets in charge. But because we don't trust big government, right? But overall, I haven't met a single Republican that these Dems are talking. These are phantom Republicans.
Yeah.
That are going, no, Lord and Lord, they're coming for us. It's ridiculous.
It turns out within Gibbs' friend group, everyone seems to agree. Amazing.
You think my friend group leads right?
Yeah. It turns out within my Christian friend group, right? Everyone really loves Christ. You think this is a great guy, right?
Who
would have seen that coming?
I mean, most of my friends are leftists.
How it's not democracy.
Hold on. What does democracy mean? Like, what do people actually vote for, right? Like, the average person says is so that they're going to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, right? That they're going to shrink the size of the federal government. And the federal government being this big, unwieldy thing in people's minds, they say, sure, yes, actually, that's great. Waste, fraud, and abuse. That's like a very convenient tagline that we can just repeat over and over again, right? But the details of that matter. Of course,
what do you think Trump ran on?
Hold on. How do the details of the plan not actually matter?
I just want to.
Because they didn't know.
I'm going to try and get this. Just answer this question. How would you define democracy?
How would I define democracy? People voting to just people voting. That's actually democracy. Just people, the people voting. That's democracy.
Like voting for what?
It depends. If we're in a democratic republic, right, then we're voting for representatives. If we're in a direct democracy, then we're voting directly for the policies.
And we're in a democratic republic.
Yeah.
So we have a constitutional republic with democratically elected representatives.
Sure. Hold on.
Academic.
So you're saying that? Okay.
I was just asking.
Hold on. Then let me ask you this, right? Are you saying that within a representative democracy, that people never end up voting for a representative who says they're going to do a thing, right? And then they start doing that thing, but they didn't understand. They didn't understand the details, and so like what they're actually getting is not what they want. You just before
in a representative democracy.
Hold on. Before we just got started, right? We were in the green room. You talked about the Green New Deal.
Yeah,
right?
I was a big fan.
You said how you were a big fan of the Green New Deal until you heard the details. Until you released it, right?
That's right?
So let's say you were a constituent of AOC, right? Yep. And you voted for that. She says she's going to get the Green New Deal. I support that. But then when she actually gets in office, she puts out a plan that you don't support. Now, you're saying, well, that's just democracy. And it is just democracy. But that doesn't necessarily it captures exactly the will of you, the individual, correct?
But here's the issue. When AOC first got elected and they're talking about a Green New Deal, the implication was a public works program investing in green energy, rebuilding roads and bridges. We've got crumbling infrastructure. And I said, that sounds fantastic. Of course, my position usually on this stuff is we got to cut spending somewhere to pay for it. We shouldn't be taxing people to do it. We shouldn't be spending money on wars. Let's stop spending money on Ukraine, Israel, insert country, Afghanistan, and bring that money back home. When AOC then released a resolution, it was diversity nonsense. It was hiring. It was getting academic scholarships to minorities. And I was like, I don't know what that's all about. The question then is, if you believe that, or the issue I suppose is, if you believe that democracy is being threatened, and you believe and agree with an institution in which you vote for a representative democratically and they get in office, if your intention then is to subvert the individual who was put into office, you are a threat to democracy. Do you agree with the system we have where we vote for representatives?
I agree with the Constitution, right? And so, and within that Constitution,
yes, we vote for representatives.
Yes, indeed, and that Constitution has clauses. It's not simply that we vote for them and they do willy-nilly, right? They simply exist in this thing called the government, and they do whatever they want, right?
So we have impeachment.
Sure. Yeah, yes. We have structures within that, right? And we have laws. And Doge is literally breaking those laws.
What laws are they breaking?
Sure. Okay, let's talk about it, right?
We're changing the subject here now.
Let's
wrap up.
The people that voted.
Okay, sure. Then let's talk about that, right? So let's talk about veterans.
Well, let's wrap up the last point.
Okay.
The point of which you asked me is, we have a system in place. Mm-hmm. People get elected all the time who lie. Politicians lie. Everybody knows it. People vote hoping that the person will represent them to the best of their abilities. Mm-hmm. This is the system we have. And a lot of people on the left keep saying our democracy, our democracy, our democracy. It's more of a liberal talking point than a conservative one, because conservatives say constitutional republic all the time. If you would try to upend the administration that was elected by your own system, which you support, you are a threat to democracy.
If that administration is upending the Constitution, they're a threat to democracy.
That's definitionally incorrect.
That's not. No, because they're breaking those laws that I'm talking about.
So there is a mechanism by which you can remove Donald Trump. It's called impeachment and conviction. If you are trying to obstruct and suspend the will of the democratic system, you're a threat to our democracy. So right now, you can argue the people did not expect Elon to do this, that, or otherwise.
Sure.
Well,
the appropriate process would be then Congress impeaches. Unfortunately, the people also elected a Republican majority, and the Republicans, looking at their constituents and current polling, which they track all year round, are supporting Donald Trump because they want to win again in 2 years. The indications are there is no popularity in stopping what Trump is doing.
Yeah, I think currently, certainly, it depends on where you go, and depends,
what about Republicans? Because that's what you.
Yeah. But again, I'm trying to get to that. Let's talk about these things. Okay, so let's talk about veterans, right? Veterans make up about 30%, according to this article from The Independent. Veterans make about 30% of the nation's federal workforce, right? So they've been disproportionately affected by these firings. So I care about veterans. I'm not sure about you guys, right?
Sure.
Okay.
You think the VA does a good job?
Hold on. Pull it back, right? So I care about veterans. I care about what happens to them. I care that veterans are part of this workforce, are being valuable members of the workforce, and they're suddenly being cut and being told they're unnecessary, that they're bloat necessarily, right? And so veterans also are more likely to vote for Donald Trump. Here is a collection of veterans who voted for Donald Trump right? But then, guess what? They got fired. So Nathan Hooven is a disabled Air Force veteran who voted for Donald Trump in November. Barry, barely 3 months later, he's now unemployed and says he feels betrayed by the president's dramatic downsizing of the federal government that cost him his job. Right? I have more stories. James Stansel, 60-year-old Army veteran who was fired last month from his job as a supply technician at the VA hospital in Milwaukee, said it felt like he'd been shot and jumped out of a helicopter.
This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous, Prime.
It's
sorry.
ridiculous. Hold on. To hear the story of veterans.
First of all, if you know any veterans, they all hate the VA. One, two. We know the VA was spending federal money to have orgies. That's literally a thing that came up recently. It was a big controversy. You can Google it if you want. Look up VA orgy. It's crazy stuff, right? So, like, why are we going to be spending money like on orgies? That's ridiculous. Hold on, Brian. One second here. So when I'm sitting here hearing what you're saying, and you're saying, oh, I can find an anecdotal example of one guy that got fired.
That's what you just used. Anecdotal examples. Hey, my friend group. My friend group likes Doge.
So sure, I'm sitting here and I'm talking about in mass quantities, right? I voted for this.
You were just
everybody that I know voted for this.
Oh, everyone you know.
Hold on, Rob. So when I'm sitting here going, I'm looking. You're finding one example of a guy that fired.
I have more examples. You're interrupting me.
We can go back to that 1 second.
Okay,
but let me just finish. When I'm looking at America as a whole, right? I'm seeing hey, what do you think that cutting the spending looks like, right? This is what it looks like. This is what we voted for. Trump ran on a couple things. He said, close the border. He did that. He said he's going to try to get out of Ukraine. We got a ceasefire going. He says he's going to stop. He's going to cut spending. Doge is cutting spending. This is what cutting the bloat looks like. Sometimes people are going to get fired. I'm sorry. Tough tits. The Postmaster General said they could cut 10K jobs and become more efficient, and they've been barely able to stay afloat for a while now. Whenever we're sitting here saying there's 10K jobs that can be cut,
that's a
that
lie.
is bloat.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.